In this video, we're going to talk about timers and how to use them to affect the state of our graphical programs. Okay, we're going to run the timer handler on a regular interval so that we can change something in our program. I think that you're going to find that this allows us to add an interesting element of excitement to our programs. So let's get started. In order to explain how to use timers to affect our graphical programs, I'm going to use a simple screensaver program. Okay, this is not a real screensaver by any means, but it's screensaver-esque. Okay, we've got text that moves around randomly on the screen every 2 seconds. So every 2 seconds, a random location is selected and that text is redrawn. So the question is, how do we accomplish that? Well, let's look at the code. All right, we're going to follow the structure for simple GUI programs that we've advocated. First, we're going to import our modules, simple GUI, and we're also going to import random. And you can guess why we have to import random, because we need to pick a random location to place that text. Then we have the global state of our program. After that, we have 3 event handlers here that we're going to discuss in more detail. We then create a frame that we can use. After we create that frame, we register our event handlers, and then finally, we get the frame and the timer started. Okay? The key to all this, of course, is the timer. And you can see here is where we create the timer with a call to simple GUI create timer. And we pass it 2 arguments, interval and tick. Well, I don't know what those do. Well, what do? We go to the docs. All right, we go to the docs, we find timer, we find create timer, and we read that. Timer takes 2 arguments, an interval and a timer handler. And it says it creates a timer. Once started, it will repeatedly call the given event handler at the specified interval, which is given in milliseconds. So the first argument is how many milliseconds we want in between calls to the second argument, or the timer handler. All right? And your timer handler should be defined and take no arguments as follows. Okay? All right, with that, let's go back to the code. This is saying interval and tick. So what is interval? Let's go up here. We can see that interval is a global variable that we have that is set to 2000. So 2000 milliseconds, that's 2 seconds. This is why our text is moving around at this rate of once every 2 seconds. The second argument was tick. And here's tick right here. This is our handler for the timer. All right, so what does this handler do? Okay, so it's going to get called every 2 seconds by the system, as we've discussed in previous lectures. Okay, and it basically does 2 things. The first is it picks a random position. Now that takes 2 lines here, where we pick x and y value on the screen using random.range, and we pick between 0 in width and 0 in height. Well, width and height are global variables, you can see above here, that define the size of the canvas. Okay, I'm also using width and height when I create the frame down here. Okay, so that I know that x and y will be somewhere in the canvas. Now they might be right on the edge of the canvas, but they're going to be in the canvas. Okay, once I've picked these random values, I'm going to change position. I'm going to set the 0th entry of position to x and the 1st entry of position to y. We can see up here that position is a global variable that is a list with 2 elements in it. And those 2 elements are x, y position, where we're going to draw the text. Notice that the tick handler does not draw any text. All the tick handler does is pick a new position. All right? And it's doing this once every 2 seconds. There is no need to draw the text. That's not the job of the tick handler. The job of the tick handler is simply to say, hey, 2 seconds have elapsed. I'm going to move the position that the text should be drawn at. Okay? You'll notice, all right, when we registered our event handlers, we also registered a draw handler, draw. So if we look at the draw handler down here, this is our handler that actually does the drawing. Okay? And it only does one thing. It takes our message. Message is another global variable. It draws it at the given position. Position is our global variable that we modified in the tick handler. Okay? And it draws it always in red in a font size of 36. Okay? You can look at the docs to refresh your memory on what draw text actually is doing. Okay? The draw handler doesn't change the position. The draw handler only uses the position. Okay, so I have 2 things that I need. I need the message that I'm going to draw, and I need the location I'm going to draw it at. Both of those things are in global variables. The draw handler does not update them. It does not care if anyone else updates them. It just uses them. This is good program decomposition. Okay, the tick handler doesn't worry about drawing the text. And the draw handler doesn't worry about where the text is, okay, or moving the text, right? And I'd like to point out that the tick handler simply runs once every 2 seconds. The draw handler actually runs much more frequently. It runs 60 times a second. Okay, so the draw handler runs 120 times every time the tick handler runs. Okay. All right, so let's run this again. Let's look at this. Okay, so what's actually happening here? The draw handler is constantly drawing this text in the location that we've told it to, and then every 2 seconds, the text moves around. Okay, how does it move around? The tick handler simply generates a new position. It doesn't redraw it, just generates a new position. The next time the draw handler runs after that, it will draw the text in that new position. Okay, and this is how the text bounces around. Okay, there's another element to my screensaver here that I can change the message. What do I want to change it to? Is great. Okay, I'm a little bit of a narcissist here. You can see that I've changed the message. And what happened? Now the message is different. I can keep changing it. Okay, I love Code Sculptor. All right, now there goes my message. Okay, I've changed it again. What's happening here? All right, if I look, I've also added an input. Okay, all right, and that input has a handler called update. So whenever I hit return, it enters new text. It calls this update handler. Right? And you can see all the update handler is assigned message to be the text that was in the text box. Okay. You can go look at the documentation for add input if you're a little bit confused here. Okay. The message is a global variable, if you recall, and that global variable is used in the draw handler to determine what text to draw. So again, the update handler here does not redraw the text, does not care about the position of the text. All it does is change the message. All right, the global variable message, which gets used by the draw handler. So this is a continuation of thinking about decomposing our programs properly, where the different event handlers don't interfere with each other. They don't know or care what each other is doing. They simply manipulate global variables appropriately, and they do only what they need to do to make the program operate. Okay. Now notice one thing here. I had to say global message. Now, we've talked about this, right? If I don't say global message, so let's take that out. Okay. I can change my message. Warren is great. Hitting return here and nothing is happening. Oh, this is very frustrating. Yeah, I can't get that message out there for you, right? Why not? Okay, because it is not updating the global variable message now. So the draw handler here is getting the old message. Okay, I need to use global. Right, down here in tick, notice I did change position without having to type global, although I could, as we've discussed before. Right, this isn't going to change anything. I can type global position. The program will still work. Right, you can still see my text bouncing around. Right, but it is not necessary. Why is it not necessary? I'm not actually changing the entire thing of position. I don't have position equals something. I'm changing elements of position, and in that case, the global declaration is optional. Okay, so now you've seen how I can use a timer to actually build a little simplistic screensaver. And you've also seen some good program design principles where I've decomposed the program. I have an update handler that handles changing the message. I have a tick handler that handles changing the position of the text. And I have a draw handler that simply draws whatever message we have currently at whatever position we have currently. These things can run at completely different rates, right? The draw handler runs 60 times a second. The tick handler runs once every 2 seconds, and the update handler runs only whenever you type text in. Okay? Yet it still all works together nicely to give us this interesting interactive application. At this point in the class, we've talked about timers several times. However, in this video, we talked about how to use timers in graphical applications. Think about the programming decomposition principles that I've talked about. You just want to use timers to update global state on a regular basis. Okay, the rest of your program should take care of everything else, right? So I'd like you to look back at the example program, maybe play around with it a bit, change the interval, see what happens, maybe change the text color or other things that you can think of to change on the regular basis without putting too much inside that timer handler. Hopefully you'll recognize now that having timers like this will allow us to add an interesting element to our interactive programs.